much for joining. I see many people joining today. This is very nice. This is the first Meet and Learn that we're organizing after the summer, and I'm very glad that you come, even so it's going to be 30 degrees outside, at least here where I am in Amsterdam. My name is Dagmar Keim. I work for the City of Amsterdam at the Department of Urban Planning and Sustainability, and I'm also managing the Asset Interact project. And these Meet and Learns are part of this Interact project. We will share a link in the chat so you can see a little bit more about the project yourself. The goal of the project is to learn, get a better understanding about what a circular built environment looks like and how we cities and regions can accelerate the circular transition via creating space for circularity in our cities. We're trying to learn how to integrate the circular principles in our urban planning. Spatial is also special about this project is that we also look at the scale of the Eurodelta. The Eurodelta is roughly the area between Amsterdam, Lille, and the Ruhr area. And it's also called the Rhine-Meuse Delta. It's built by water. And we want to see in the project if the Eurodelta can help, collaboration on the scale of the Eurodelta can help to accelerate the transition of the circular environment. We have about 11 project partners, and one of them is at TU Delft. And today I'm very delighted that we have Dr. Alexander Wandl here. Dr. Alexander Wandl is Associate Professor at the Environmental Technology and Design Faculty of Architecture and the Built Environment at the Delft University, and actually you're head of the Environmental Technology and Design section. So I'm very honored that you made time. As I read in your resume, and as we learned already during the project, you have a very thorough understanding of sustainable urbanism, and especially focusing on the spatial aspects of circular economy in cities and regions. So this was, I think that you're a very valuable asset in our project, and I'm very honored that you're sharing this today with us. You have a very interdisciplinary approach in which you combine urban planning, landscape architecture, and spatial data sciences. Besides that, Alexander is teaching at TU Delft, and we hope that in the future we will be able to hire a lot of your students that have a very thorough understanding how to integrate sustainability issues, especially circularity, in urban planning. Alexander, you're also steering group member of the TU Delft Circular Built Environment Hub. And you will tell us today more about your work and what you, at the TU Delft you're organizing. Before I give Alexander the word, I have to say that this meeting will be recorded. So if you do not want to be on the recorded and will not be, which will be published also on YouTube, please turn off your camera, turn off your name, and just listen. Alexander, you will the first. I would like to give you the word now. If anybody has questions, please add it in the chat. And we also have in the end, half an hour, 20 minutes to ask Alexander some questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dagmar, for the introduction and the invitation to present here. Also, thank you all for joining, indeed, on a Friday afternoon. I will share my presentation in a second. I hope you see my slides.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
I'll just put your faces on the other screen for the moment. Well, my contribution today is called Territorializing Circularity. And it's, of course, not work I'm doing alone, but as Dagmar already said, with partners. And a lot of the work that I'm presenting here was done with my long-year colleague and collaborator, Cecilia Forlan. But I'll start with something else, if it works. So, yeah. And this is with the Circular Built Environment Hub. Dagmar already mentioned this is a group of 60 to 70 researchers at the Faculty of Architecture and Built Environment that since 2017 work together on circularity and the built environment. We have a very broad research portfolio. I'm not going into details. I'm just showing you well, some examples that really go through scales. Showing here the P-Lab. It's about how you can gain raw materials from urine, for example, or aspects on circularity on the level of the facade, on the building covenants, or more on the policy level. Also, what has circularity to do with communities, neighborhoods, and so forth. Of course, circular area development research project, and my specialty, working through scales from neighborhoods to the region and mega region. What is important is also, as a hub, we are trying to communicate beyond our academic environment and beyond academics, and we published quite some nice stories about these projects, which bring the key findings really to the point for a wider audience. Well, when 2017 starting to work together, we of course were all specialists on our own parts, on our own disciplines, scales, things that we are looking at, and we realized very quickly that if we want to really get things developed, we need to find a joint concept. So we spent more than 2 years together to define a working definition of what is actually the circular built environment. You will hear me today very seldomly talking about circular economy, but rather circularity, circular built environment, circular society, because I'm trying to have a bit more holistic understanding of circularity than what this mainstream circular economy theories including. So when we talk about the circular built environment, well, then we see it as a system designed for narrowing, slowing, and closing. Well, that's not surprising. Resource loops at different spatial temporal levels by transitioning cultural, environmental, economic, and social values towards a sustainable way of living, meaning staying within the planetary boundaries. To do that and to collaborate on that through scales and aspects, we developed this scales to aspect model, what we are how we call it, which has in the inner ring kind of scales from the material scale, component, the building scales, neighborhood, city, region, which we don't understand as well. The one is the result of the other, but it's always more, right? It's very simple. A neighborhood is not only a circular neighborhood is not only a collection of circular buildings, but it's also about how the public spaces, the lifestyles that are possible, and so forth. So we understand this through scales always, and then we have aspects on the outer side, which is management, technology, design, resource flows, stakeholders, and the economy as such, where they are in principle related to all scales, and the visualization on the right shows that how they are related. So this is kind of the framework when we are trying to work together. Just good. Having done that, for us the next step was, of course, well, there's a lot of knowledge, but we need to know among our knowledge, and we need also, and Dagmar said, in order to educate architects, urban planners, building technologists of the future, to get the information to our teachers as well. So we developed a platform, Circularity for Educators, with a lot of videos, materials, and so forth that go through definitions, best practices, theories, and so forth. And we made this from the beginning on open for everybody. Although we have it steered towards teachers and educators, it's open for everybody. It's available. The link is in the presentation, will be done. And what we also have, we have kind of lectures and information from our specifically dedicated circularity educators also there. So it's really a super nice platform of short videos that gives a basic gives you a really quick start on concept. What we also did, and there the Interact asset project comes also into play, because we are also feeding that, is the Circular Design Atlas, which is a repository of examples across scales of circular, from circular buildings, neighborhoods, material, and so forth. You can filter the atlas. There are many examples, and then you get to kind of a more detailed description. Here I on purpose used the example that's not in the Eurodelta, an Italian example, the city of Prato, and you get the information, what scales, resources, aspects, design approaches are related, and with a button, if you click on the PDF, you get even more detailed information. What is crucial here is also this: we are on the way to open it up, because so far it was only TU Delft and our students, our researchers filling it. We are opening it up now with Asset. Also, our colleagues from the project open it, and in the next half year, we hope to make it also a complete open repository of best practices. Also, I'll talk about this at the end a little bit more. Quite some lifelong learning courses, profits, MOOCs, and we're doing a lot of also a yearly summer school, and have special training programs. Another thing that's always interesting, we also want to promote those graduation students that work on circularity in our faculty. So we have a graduation award that we award every year for the best 5 graduation projects. In our aim to also come to reach a wider public, we're also organizing every 3 months a public debate where we specifically address with the topics that we think are relevant practice, and the general public spend an evening discussing aspects of it. Nice discussion about what is the role of the Eurodelta on that scale. Summer school, I've been talking. Good. This was now a quick summary of what the circular built environment hub in total is, what we are doing, and we are always open to collaborate. So here's the link. Also, you can also scan the code to get there, and feel free to contact us also if you want to collaborate. So now back to the actual contribution. Territorializing circularity. Why is this a topic that's so close to my heart? And that is the reason in images, because whenever you look for, you Google, you check your policies and so forth, and you look for circular cities and regions, what you see is a combination of Sankey and flow diagrams with very abstract understandings and principles of a city. And they hardly ever, very, very few projects are out there where they come together. And for me, as an urbanist, there is something that facilitates the flow exchange, but it's our environment. It's where we live, and we need to see that. We need to see the flows as an integral part of that, and not as something that's technology system that is separated. As I said, I'll rely my presentation not only on my own research, but also on research by colleagues and postdocs and my PhDs, and also very much on the work we do in our design courses with our students. Here are the sources for you to fill in. So what is really underlying here is, and this illustrates that, if we're talking about circularity, if we're talking about flows, then we're talking about places, we're talking about infrastructures, we're talking about energy systems, we're talking we are not talking about the technological systems only, but we're talking about a multi-scala, multifaceted territorial system that has locations, places, qualities, specific needs for infrastructures, and so forth. So important is we try to consider this, the territory not only as a container where something happens, but also as a subject, because it's there. There are contemporary urban planning and design consider built environments, metabolism, so the flows, and to promote the transition towards a more circular way of living. So, which flows are it? Then we start always with questions: which flows? What are the activities involved? And what are the relationships? This is very simple, and I go very quickly through it, because you can actually say, okay, well, we are having activities. The activities have input, they have processes, they have stocks, they have output. Multiple activities are linked together by infrastructure, relations, exchanges, and so forth. And if you put them together for an area, for certain value chains, you come to a systemic diagram of activities where these relations can be described. So now this is exactly what I was criticizing at the beginning of my lecture, because the question is now, how can we relate this to the territory? And I have here an example of Martina Rim, where she did that for Limburg, and the top part is actually the systemic diagram brought on a map and related in this case with the infrastructure of waste. You can relate it also with the infrastructure of or with the infrastructure landscape of the energy system. So what are heat exchangers, what renewable energy sources, biomass potential, and so forth. And of course with people, with what's the mobility, what are their mobility questions, what is their employment questions, what are densities, and so forth. It's really important to add this qualitative, morphologic, physiologic layers next to the systemic understanding of economic activities. So, theory is easily explained, but how do we do that? How can we do that, and how can we do it also on a bigger scale and in a little bit more automated way? So, 2018 until 2020, we developed what we call the activity-based spatial material flow analysis, where we answered that questions: where in the region are they flow, what is the quality, quantity, who are the actors involved, what are the potentials for synergies. It's an online system that first puts the actors on a map. You identify the flows between the actors, you add the material properties to the flows, and you can have displayed detailed, accurate information. So you know who has at which point which flows, where did we go to, how far, in which quantities, and in which quality. We did this mapping for waste, in this case, for several cities: Amsterdam, Hamburg, Łódź, Naples in Italy, Ghent, Estelberg in Belgium, and Pécs in Hungary. Why I show you these examples is because if you click through them, you see that the extent and the scales that cities deal with waste in this case is very different. So our conclusion was actually the scale of circularity. There is not a scale or a perfect scale, but it's a matter of values, policies, infrastructure, and spatial organization. And this is spatial planning, if you so want, urbanism, urban design, regional design, and so forth as part. So there is no, because I get often the answer, so what is now the perfect scale for a certain circular city and so forth? There is not one, because it depends on what we and how we want to live together, actually, if I may put that down on the last thing. Good. So that method gave us already a way to be a bit further, but it's really not yet 100% spatial, and we're not talking about qualities and so forth. Therefore, I'm going to show you now several projects in the next minutes on how we use this way of thinking in modeling, design, regional neighborhood scale design, and regional design. first thing is, well, this is still, well, like the bird, like the crow flies. So first thing is you have to actually make selection. What waste flows are specifically crucial. In this case, the project was to identify what are the potentials for timber wood. So you look at what are the mode flows, you understand, you model, okay, which are the routes that are most likely taken. You relate those system elements to two things. The one is, where do we expect to need the most in the future? And where do we expect to have additional urban mines in the future? So you get a clearer understanding of the spaces that are relevant. And we then introduced something what's called a resource shed, so like a watershed of resources, to be able to understand a little bit better where are concentrations and deconcentrations of materials, needs, infrastructure, and so forth. With this information, you can, well, some clear results. Well, flows exceed the city administrative boundaries. That's clear anyway. The nice thing is this analysis allows us to think a bit more on alternative synergies and at different spatial levels. And to see examples of what we did, I show here a result of research of one of my PhDs, Tanya Tsui, that she was looking at based on the same data that I showed you in beforehand. So if we need building hubs in the metropolitan region of Amsterdam, and we look for locations among potential locations based on cost on CO2 reductions, then you get the large scale, the larger circles on the right side as ideal locations. Now, I said the scale is a question of values. Euros and CO2 is a value. So these things can be questioned, can be changed, and so forth. But to have this information be started, this way of understanding allows you to make better, better informed decisions, and also allows you to have other discussions and more deeper discussions. I'll jump a complete scale. We all have been through tremendous geopolitical changes and challenges over the last years. And this flow thinking, and this made us look together with drift and geofluxes at the way to understand how may international flow changes through the ports of the Netherlands and Belgium, but you're sure mostly Netherlands, have an effect on the economy and the land use specifically in the hinterland of the ports. So what we did, similar kind of mapping, is we looked at which flows come into the ports in the Netherlands, which products with resources. Then we did kind of one step further, where are these products resources are used and further produced. And then we compared, go back to look at 4 scenarios where we looked at, okay, what if we have not access to critical raw materials? What if we go for a low energy economy? What if we go for a timber-based construction sector? What if we go to a kind of non-export oriented food area? And I just bring you one example. What you see if we look at the critical raw materials, then you see very little on the large map of the Netherlands, but it's on a level of the plot. But it's more than 1 million jobs, 100,000 companies, and so forth, all over the country that are negatively influenced. And this is only the first step. So this was the first kind of looking at this flow thinking on the global national scale and how this influences planning. Because what is interesting is you can anticipate then where are actually also land use changes, or where are going to be which business parks do we have to look in more detail. What we saw very often is that this modeling, with this modeling approach, we can deal with a certain complexity. But if we make the step to designing, we need tools that help us to grasp this complexity a bit better and relate it also even more to spatial qualities. And what we are promoting and teaching our students is what we call a systemic section. And the systemic section is actually not, it's not what you would see a territorial architectural section from A to B, but it's a section that connects places, their qualities, their conditions along a value chain or a value web, so multiple value chains. Here it's the construction sector, no, here's actually the kind of what is now the current wood sector in, again, this is for I think it was the idea was for Amsterdam originally, and we said, well, if we're gonna do the shift further towards more bio-based, which Amsterdam, with the help covenant, of course, aims to, there will be a change. What will be a change? Well, first we need to understand what is actually the current construction sector that's going on. So we have the current construction sector, the relations in principles, and then we need to say, okay, well, we need materials. We need, of course, most of the materials will come from somewhere else, but it also allows potentials to actually change the landscape closer by, not necessarily in Amsterdam, but be it in parts of the Netherlands and so forth, if you really want to have a shift there. Well, we're gonna need a CLT or other types of wood-based industries to add and support and go. Then you have, if you have a new industry in, you have residual materials. You need to think about cascading flows, combining other links and so forth, and you get to a complete different system. There's a different relations, different flow relations, needs different spaces, needs different infrastructure, and will change the landscape. And just to illustrate these two drawings, the bottom is the current, and the top is the more circular one. Well, you see, it's much more complex. In this sense, it's more complex, but it's also more regenerative, more green, more and so forth. And I think that is kind of what this way of thinking allows you to discuss, negotiate, and connect space with circularity questions that focus on flows, economic activities. I'll go now a step further in a project in Charleroi where Cecilia Furlan, who I mentioned before, and with Studio Brother Vigano work together. This is the area. The competition asked for the redevelopment of these 5 elements in the area. They started with an understanding, okay, if we start with circularity, with a metabolic circular project, then we look at how circular water strategies come together with reusing wastes, how we can have a more renewable and cascaded energy production, how can soft mobility and connection public transport relate to that, and how can we actually use also the regenerative aspect of circularity, vegetation as structural and productive element in a specifically so extremely polluted area as a former mining area. And you see below the systemic section, which I introduced to you in a principle that gives already a more and clearer spatial understanding what's how it should change. Well, translating that into the kind of master plan, using the landscape as structural elements to organize things. That's the reason, having free, and put here free principles, reconnecting designs, so thinking about the mobilities, regenerating land. So how do we use landscape elements to regenerate, and not only regenerate, but also make more accessible and have more qualitative open and green spaces? And how can we facilitate industrial symbiosis, if you so want, so circulation among the production? Key question was how to deal with soil. There's a lot of technical aspects on how can you do that with plants, and certain parts without plans if it needs to be very quick. How does this relate to CO2, nitrogen, and so forth? These activities, and how do you do that actually in a way that you're also creating a different quality of places? Because I think that's also important in the discussion that is completely under is lacking so far is, does a circular city, does a circular neighborhood have a different aesthetics than the current one? I think yes, but perhaps that's something for discussion. Well, and then it's the same is for energy efficiency, and talking about energy efficiency Europe. And then it's also through scales, through systems, so including active and technical system like heat exchange, but also passive or design solutions in the public space and the buildings to actually need also less energy. Well, that's then the plans that counted, just some impressions. Then I go to the last project more or less that I saw, which is on a completely different scale. And this is a student project of Preksha Rautela, just graduated before the summer. And she was looking at the critical raw materials act and what the effects on the Netherlands would be. And this is a super complex topic. So she actually only looked at magnets and the materials that are in magnets. And magnets are in nearly everything that is electric or electronic, I should say. So without magnets, we would just not have a very, very different lifestyle. So she looked at, okay, what are the critical raw material acts goals? How are they defined? And it's at least 10% of the annual consumption for extraction in the EU. This means new mines. If you're following the news, there are huge discussions in Sweden, Norwegian, Serbia about opening new mines for materials. For critical raw materials, well, the idea is that at least 40% of EU annual consumption is processed in the EU. At the moment, it's nearly 90%, 95%, if I'm not mistaken, is outside the EU, mostly in China. Well, we should have at least 25% consuming, and that is 2030. So this is around the corner, very close around the corner. So what she did is, well, there is an interesting contradiction in the whole thing. Because if we're moving to the right, that's an image how ChatGPT sees the future climate adaptive European city and energy neutral European city. If you want to move to something to the right, we need more critical raw materials. So there's kind of a vicious cycle. To achieve climate neutrality, we need more critical raw materials. So that, and critical raw materials need space, because all the actions that I said, the goals, they require actually mining sites, production sites, collection sites, remanufacturing sites, processing sites, and so forth. So the question is now for her, and that she put it, how does the Netherlands position itself in this discussion? What if you say, well, we don't care about processing, we focus on the other parts? What if we do some of the processing? What if we do really all the processing that we need, and so forth? And what if we? So she made 4 scenarios: the knowledge economy scenarios, industrial leaders, self-sufficient, and regenerative. She named them. She put them also with societal values, because they are behind these decisions. What they on material consumption, supply chain, spatial. And what does this mean for spatial organization? I think that the last one is, from my field, of course, the interesting one. And then there comes, and this is a systemic section where there's a lot of information in. So I'll dwell a little bit on that, because this comes with a lot of questions. Because, as I said, there needs to be an understanding: how much area does a manufacturing facility take? How much repair hubs? How much to these things if we don't put all the cars, just send them somewhere outside of the EU? what is processing plants? How much do we need? What's the quantities? How many? How they are distributed? And the distribution of this individual functions are different per scenario. And what she then did, she drew futures for 2050 actually for the Netherlands. Actually, it's more than the Netherlands, because you cannot think the Netherlands without the Ruhrgebiet and parts of Flandern when discussing about these things. How would that look like? So if we do a kind of business as usual, then the growth is concentrated in the Randstad. Of course, if we want to become industrial leaders in these fields, which would be a kind of a green growth scenario, then the growth concentrates around the Delta corridor. Rotterdam would probably have a bigger processing function, and Eindhoven a bigger manufacturing function. If we talk about the more self-sufficiently, that would be a much more decentralized system, because then the direct mining of urban mining plays a bigger role. The inland rivers play a bigger role than the port. And if we're aiming for a more regenerative approach, well, then it's actually we think about concentrating a safe and high and dry locations and so forth. So you see that looking only from a magnet and thinking it through, like I said, spatial organization, policies, values, makes us think very different about the future. And I'm nearly done. So I think including circular approach in design is still an open question. So it's not done a lot, but it's important. The examples show how different dimensional process design could be integrated into urban regional spaces through the scale. And what is important is that this way of integrating things allows us for a different negotiation, a different discussion, also a different way of thinking about participation. That was the content. I just want to make a bit of self-promotion. As I said, the Circular Built Environment Hub has online courses, professional education courses, and we're starting with 2. The first one is in the next month. The one is the Spatial Circularity Strategies for Sustainable Regional Development. That goes really more in what I showed you here. It's a 9-week course for professionals. And the other one is Circular Building Products for Sustainable Built Environment, which is really on the product and building level. And they start very quickly, 2-3 weeks. So if somebody's still interested, there's still some places, I think. Good. I hope I stayed more or less in time. And I'm looking forward to hearing your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Alexander. This was a very comprehensive presentation. I think a lot of questions arose. I would like to give the floor actually to the audience if somebody has some questions. I have to say one thing. I'm sorry about this, but I just got a message from my ECT department that I will close my computer. So maybe I will leave because there's a security issue. I'm very sorry about this, but I just would like to tell you that. And probably everybody from the city of Amsterdam will leave within the next 15 minutes.
Okay, interesting.
Interesting. New world.
Well, let's see who stays here for the discussion then. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I saw some questions from Henk in the chat about the financial aspect, something that, Alexander, you didn't mention at all, but then Henk, you also pulled it back. I would be interested, why did you ask it and why did you pull it back?
I'm not sure if I pulled it back, but looking at the complexity, I can imagine that asking a question, how much does it cost, is a bit simple, obviously. But on the other hand, I know that Amsterdam has done a study, it's done by Arcadis, whatever, on the bankability of green policies in Amsterdam on the metropolitan regional scale. And that's, for us, very interesting. We will talk about it at our conference in Bucharest. And I was simply wondering if at least some of the studies you mentioned, because there are many, of course, there are many students, it's a big group, if there is somewhere also some research, some studies on let's say cost. How does bankability sounds, by the way, broader, so it's not only what it costs. This Arcadis study shows that in principle, a lot of the green policies of the city of Amsterdam or metropolitan region are actually can pay for themselves, which is good news. But in that sense, I'm wondering, if that is also an aspect that is involved in these studies that you have shown.
Yeah, good question. I first want to say, Dagmar, you said I was not talking about cost at all. Also with me, they have something popping up. Seems to be bigger. I was talking about costs, because if I talk about values, I'm talking about costs, right? So this is what is worth what. Hank, to your question in more detail, I'm not an economist, but what so I don't talk about, I try not to talk about what I don't understand, or that I'm not an expert from. But for example, what we put in terms of the modeling aspects, we put costs in, but then it was not necessarily what you say banking costs, so that the complex cost, but it was rather costs for different actions. So you can put land prices in, you can put transportation costs in, but I think the cost to formulate the costs for a transformation of an economic system is something that's just absolutely beyond my expertise, right? So there are other people from, and we hear, or what I read is that, well, I think the energy system is a really nice example by now, and therefore I'm a bit surprised about the nuclear discussion. By now we actually know that the renewable energy infrastructures are so much cheaper to get a kilowatt hour to produce that I think that the cost discussion, independent even, whether we're talking about growth, degrowth, post-growth, and so forth, is one that is something that's over time different. It's a very quick change in it. But as I said, I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert on that field.
It could be interesting to maybe look at, I don't know if it's Erasmus in Rotterdam, but to maybe at some point involve, let's say economists or people like that in this issue, because it will be something that will be asked. I ask it.
Of course.
I don't have money, so I don't care. But I mean, it is of course a big thing that is also a societal effect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Henk. Peter Paul from the city of Den Haag, you raised your hand as well.
Yeah, thank you, Dagmar. Thank you, Alexander, for the nice presentation. Impressive what you did regarding research on circularity the last decade. You are also involved in the asset project we are doing now with the EuroDelta partners. And this is also about the territorializing circularity. Nice word, territorializing.
So making it spatial, it's fine.
Spatial, yeah, absolutely. But I'm curious, did this research in which you're also involved already get some new insights for you about the spatial aspects on circularity, particularly in the EuroDelta? Because that's also an aim for us to get some more insights of this, whether this skill is an interesting skill also for certain materials also to exchange. You already said there is no ideal skill of it, but it might already generate some new insights also for you. So I'm very curious about this point.
Well, I'll try to be short on this because there's a lot. So yes, I think the supranational or the beyond national scale, and they're talking about regions, is a very, very crucial one. Why? As we see from the flows and economic activities and so forth hardly care about administrative boundaries, right? It's one economic system, the EuroDelta. So. And it's one economic system that doesn't have a governance, so that makes it difficult to steer. Therefore, this thinking about territorializing, what does it actually mean, is important. So that's on the overall. So why is that scale? The second thing, which is super crucial and makes it super important, is actually a policy change that I don't think is many people are aware of. And this is the critical raw material act. Municipalities have now, and I don't remember exactly the months, but have now, perhaps I have it somewhere, time to for the what's it called? Well, if a company wants to build a mining or production site or so on, they have now, I think, 12 to 6 to 20, maximum 20. How's it called? I'm not finding it. Yeah, now strategic processing recycling permit granting needs to be now within 15 months or 27 months for crucial. This is, and here we are discussing about, these are strategic elements. Well, not every municipality, not every region or not every province will need to have these strategic elements. So there we need to discuss it. And also we are coming in a very uneven game. If I don't know, a multi-billion dollar or euro international company is asking for such a processing recycling facility, and the opposite is kind of a small planning department and a small legal department of a small town or city. Yeah. So this is the question. So it needs a strategic choice in that, and the policy actually asks for this strategic choice very quickly, because otherwise we would just happen what happens. So first come, best lawyers, most money. Yeah. So I think that's so if we want, and that's what I say, if we want to make this decision and if we want to think about how we live together, and if we want to not only see circularity as only resource efficiency, then we need to work together and we need to strategically make decisions together on this scale. And I leave it for that now. There is other things. Now one if I may. There's so much infrastructure in the Eurodelta, specifically water, rails, streets, and so forth. And at the moment, this is of course absolutely optimized for the linear globalized economy. Right? That's what it is. Huh? It's a powerhouse. And we see that certain infrastructures can and are relevant. Well, I showed you the whole waterways, the whole business parks, and so forth for a circular economy. We need these spaces. But it needs a policy framework that doesn't, how do you say, that puts an equal playing field, at least an equal playing field. For the use and of this infrastructure.
Thank you.
Alexander, thank you very much. I get so many questions now in the chats. This is really a pity. We only have a few minutes left, 3 actually. I would like to take the question from Anja. Anja Steentjes, because you're not part of the project. Anja, would you like to explain your question? You're saying...
Yes, I'm Anja Steentjes. I'm working for the Ministry of Economic Affairs on the Department of Regions and also Space. And one of the things where there's a lot of discussion of is, can you say that circularity in the end will need lesser space or more space? In my opinion, you need for the time being and in the transition at least more space. But I wondered, you have looked at the economic flows and how they change and how they interact. So I wondered what your impression is from your study in the use of space, and is that important that you have a space in or near cities, or can it be more spatial of geographically dispersed?
Yeah, distributed. Yeah, I think a very good question, and the one that I'm thinking also hard about it, and doing more and more, and well, trying to do more research because it's not easy. So I would agree with your first conclusion, absolutely. In the transition, we will need more space because we have still old users. That's the kind of thing. So if a circular economy in total in 30, 50 years needs more space or not, depends a bit. And that depends a bit on if we're following a kind of a green growth model, where we say, well, we still will grow, then I think a green growth model will take more space as now, and very simple, because growing and harvesting bio-based materials takes more space. The energy density of oil is higher than of wind farms. So you can go through this. Having our own processing facilities and so forth will also take more space as we have now. We will lose some, but having a material independency, that depends very much what do we do nationally, what do we do on the EU level with our partners and so forth, or are we aiming for a global circular economy, which is also feasible, right? It's in the realm of possible. So that these choices that depend whether we need. So I think, and this is what shows the last years, for the energy side, we need for sure more space, and renewable energy is the basic for circular. There's no circular economy without renewable energy. And for geopolitical independence, we also need more space. So that's the quantitative side. The qualitative side is now an interesting one, and I think there it's a discussion of what can be done as close as possible, and then it becomes also financially feasible, material-wise feasible, time-wise feasible, because I think that's something that is also, because we have our economy now is on demand, right? And the circular economy will not be on demand because there is time lags between the time cycles become much longer, and we have to think and so forth. So also there, I assume we need more space and a more decentralized way of organizing things. I hope that answers partially the question.
Yeah, it is 2-1. So unfortunately, I will have to stop this discussion. There are a couple of questions in this chat that came actually from project partners, so we can discuss this within the project another time. I would like to finish this, and thank you, Alexander, very, very much for this discussion. Gave us a lot of insight also about all the theoretical framework work you've been doing. The last person I would like to give the word is Peter Paul. You are organizing actually the next Meet and Learn. Maybe you would like to tell us what you're going to do, and that it will be quite different than our normal lunch lecture.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Dagmar. It will be a special one on September 27. It will be 2 hours from 12 to 2, and it will be focused on rules for circular economy in the construction sector, and particularly European rules. And it will be special because particularly for the session and discussion paper is being made to explain also what kind of rules are relevant, and also how they are translated to national and local rules. There will be three speakers, a legal expert, one of a city, the city of Amsterdam, and one of a developer/constructor. So from 3 different sides, it will be explained, and will be also an interactive discussion on it. And it's also special because it will be followed up by a 2 days physical conference in November, 40 and 50 November in The Hague, where we will further have this discussion. And we also hope to, in the end, to advise also Brussels to improve rules, because we also want to discuss what might also be negative side effects of rules, negative side effects also on spatial effects. So that's in a nutshell the thing we are going to do on September 27 from 12 to 14, but we will communicate more about it very soon.
Thank you very much, Peter. Perfect on time. It is 1 o'clock. I think my computer will close now in 1 minute. So I would like to say goodbye to everybody. And Alexander, I will give you a call. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. And
thank you very much, everybody. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.